I want to introduce you to our guest this morning, Laura Vivian, author of This Should Have Never Happened, The Release of a Tortured Mind. Laura Vivian is a mother and was a daughter. She was the victim of numerous acts of assault by her father. She fights to protect and bring healing to the victimized. Laura Vivian is a former Fortune 500 leader, speaker, author, and educator. This book is a true life account of Laura, a child whose mother was only physically present and a father's force that was ever present, imposing sexual terror upon their 7 children. Laura Vivian, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Laura, your story is so compelling. I kind of want to set the stage for the audience a little bit in regards to your journey, because it's such a vivid, very detailed, very in-depth view as you track your growing up under the oppression of a father that no one knew in the public, and no one was made aware until you began to reconcile what was going on in your life.
Correct.
It is a story that's all too common, all too frequent, and I want to make sure that our audience realizes that you are not part of this Me Too movement that's out there where everybody's claiming something happened to them 40 or 50 years ago and levying charges against someone. This is a verified story by your siblings, by your family, that the therapy that you went through, the counseling you went through, the pastoral counseling you went through, as well as the psychological counseling you went through, was the outcome. And this book is the cathartic documentation of making sure that people become aware of things that were the norm for you, but were skewed so far that normal was truly abnormal. So
exactly.
Take us back as we kind of set the stage. The home you grew up in, the role of your mother, the role of your father, the part that the church appeared to play but didn't really play, and how all that came about and when all this began.
Okay. My story begins at birth. I was groomed from the time that I was born, as were my siblings, by our father to do whatever he wanted. My story is different than theirs in that I didn't remember much of the sexual abuse until 3 years ago. My father died 3 years ago after a very short illness. And up until that time, I knew that he had abused my brothers and sisters and I, emotionally, physically, and I had even witnessed some of the sexual abuse of my brothers and sisters. But I wasn't aware of the extent of what I had actually gone through. And so I thought I was spared from all of it. Well, about 3 months after my father passed away, I was having an enjoyable, relaxing evening with my husband, celebrating our anniversary of the day we met. And I was almost asleep, and all of a sudden, I had this awareness, this picture in my brain, and it started coming like movies of all of the abuse that he had inflicted on me. Everything came back, just flooding, just over and over. It was a nightmare. And so this was a new realization. This wasn't the Laura that I had known all my life. This was a completely different person. And so I started going into therapy. And as I was going through therapy, one of the main tools that I used was my journaling. I love to write. I've always been a writer. Never published anything before now, but I've always loved to write. It's been my passion. And so as I'm journaling and I'm telling my story, and I started at the age of 3 because that's my earliest memory, and I'm journaling it in the words of the child because that's how I was remembering it. I was that child again. I wasn't a 60-year-old woman. I was now this young 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 7-year-old, 10-year-old, all the way up to the age of 18. So as I'm doing this journaling, I'm thinking, this story is powerful. And I'm showing it to some of my family, some of my friends, and they're agreeing that this needs to be told. And the reason that I have published the book, first of all, I want it known that the question I'm often asked is, am I ashamed? Am I embarrassed? No, because I didn't do anything wrong. I was an innocent victim of an evil, evil man, as were my brothers and sisters. We were just children like you guys were children, like everybody else was children. And we just happened to be born to this evil person. And so as I was journaling and I wrote the book, as I put in there, I want people to picture, if you would, when I say child abuser, what's the first picture that comes into your mind? Is it a dirty, scraggly, drunken, falling down slob? Is it a yelling, hollering? What is your picture in your mind? I'm sure the picture you have right now was not my father. He was very well dressed. He was an outstanding member of our community. He was very charismatic, good looking. Everybody liked him. We lived in a really nice house in a good subdivision on a lake. So we were the all-American upper middle class family. He even drove nice cars. At his death, he owned a Porsche, and he was very proud of that. So this is the person that the community saw. It was so unimaginable, and when I look back on it now, this man literally led the church in choir on Sunday morning. So that's how the parallels were so different. And then he would go home and he would abuse us. He would do whatever he wanted, when he wanted, however he wanted to all of his children, boys and girls. So this perfect gentleman, good husband, and good dad was doing this continually, but it wasn't anything that we argued against because it's just what we did. We had done this from birth. I mean, like I say, he groomed us. He raised us to know that he was in charge. And he also taught us that if you do anything against me, I can and will hurt you. He drove that point home to me when I was 12 years old, because at that point I had gone to, as you mentioned, I went to a Catholic private school. And I did become close to the Lord, especially in 4th and 5th grade. I gave my life to the Lord at that point. And as I'm doing that, I'm thinking, what he's doing, that's not right. And so I went to my mother after school one day and I said, Mom, what Dad's doing to us, that's not right. He can't do that anymore. Well, she had been also conditioned by him to keep quiet. And she said, you better be quiet. You better not say anything. And I said, Mom, I'm going to school tomorrow and I'm going to tell my teacher. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And she said, Laura, she said, we are a perfectly normal family. And I said, no, we're not. And I screamed off and I slammed the bedroom door, and I was more determined than ever. I was gonna put him in jail tomorrow. That evening while I was in the bathtub, he came in there. I thought he was going to abuse me like he often did, but I saw the rage in his eyes, and I knew, and it's not about what he normally does. And he yelled at me and he said, you're the one that's causing all of this. It's your fault. And I'm 12 years old and I'm thinking, how could that be my fault? And he said, and if you go and tell anybody, they're going to lock you away because this is all your fault. Then he slammed the door and he left. So I sat there for a few minutes in the bathtub and I'm thinking, wow, I caused this? And then I thought, I was mature enough at that age, because I was very mature at 12, to think, no, I did not cause this. All of the screaming and all of the hollering in this house, all of the beatings that go on daily, all of the torture that goes on every night, That's not me. I'm not doing that. He is, and he cannot continue to get away with it. I was the oldest girl, had two older brothers, felt very responsible for them, for all of my brothers and sisters. And if my mom wasn't going to do it, then by golly, tomorrow I'm going to go to school and I'm going to tell somebody. So I went to bed that night with that thought. I had my resolve. So about 3 o'clock in the morning, he came to our bedroom, as he often did most nights. If it wasn't us, it was our brothers. My two sisters were in the double bed next to my single bed across the room. And I was laying there on my stomach, and I was thought I was, going to be real quiet. He'll leave me alone tonight. This won't be my night. Well, I was wrong. He jumped on my back, and he hurt me with such force that there was blood on the sheets in the morning. And I couldn't sit the next day at school. It was the most painful. It's beyond pain. Painful doesn't explain, but it wasn't just the physical pain, it was the emotional pain. He was treating me like an animal. And I was hollering and I was screaming. And I remember thinking, where's my mom? Why isn't she doing something? Because she had to have heard it. I know my sisters heard it. I knew my brothers heard it. I heard them whimpering down the hall also. So as I'm listening to them crying, I'm thinking, I'm scaring my little sisters and being responsible for them. I said, it's okay. Be quiet. It's okay. I'm okay. As I said that through the tears and through the pain. And he growled at me and he said, yeah, you better be quiet. You're hurting. You're scaring your little sisters. So I did. I let him finish his evilness. And then when he left, my sisters came to me and I rolled up into a ball. I was just hurting so bad. And they came and they put their arms around me. So they were now comforting me. And I knew that night that he had gotten the message across. He didn't just get it across to me. He got it across to everyone in that house. My mother, my brothers, my sisters. That if we said or did anything, he could and would hurt us. So I went to school the next morning, and the next morning, well, actually, when I woke up the next morning, it was strange because I knew something bad had happened, but I didn't know what it was. And that's when the dissociative amnesia started. Up until the age of 12, I had remembered everything that he had done to us, every single detail. I knew exactly when he was doing it, what he was doing it. But from the age of 12 on, not only did I forget everything up to that point, I also dissociated when he came to me, which he did into my early adulthood. And so those memories of what he was doing to me and had done to me were all locked away in the back of my brain.
I want to stop. Yeah, I want to stop you there for a minute. We're about to come up on our time for break, but there's 2 points I want to bring out very carefully. Yesterday's show and some prior shows, we've had discussions with psychological professionals, psychiatric professionals, medical professionals in the area of the compartmentalization of the brain, of how it is that we can not remember, how it is that we can put into a protected area in the brain's innate capability to protect itself, protect its entity
Yes.
by pushing these and repressing these so that you actually could go through life without the realization, even though these experiences are logged away. The second point I want to make is your father's name was Abaddon. All right? Now, I don't know how much research you've done to the name Abaddon, but Abaddon and its Greek equivalent Apollyon both appear in the Bible as a place of destruction and an angel of the abyss, the pit,
Yes.
the pit of hell. Abaddon is used as a reference to the bottomless pit, often appearing alongside the place Sheol, meaning the realm of the dead. In the New Testament book of Revelation, an angel called Abaddon is described as the king of an army of locusts. And so this is, in Latin, exterminus, or the destroyer. So this was a prophetic name spoken at birth over your father, and it was straight from the pit of hell to name a child for the evil that would be prophesied over him by his name and how that was spoken into existence. If we don't understand the spiritual realm, then we don't understand how when you name your child, the prophecy that you are speaking over them in something as simple as a name. We're talking with Laura Vivian, author of This Should Never Have Happened, The Release of a Tortured Mind. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue to dig deeper into this compelling story. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Laura Vivian, author of This Should Never Have Happened, The Release of a Tortured Mind. Laura, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
You know, when we open the program...
I want to address some... Yeah.
When we opened the program, we encountered an unusual amount of disturbances and disruptions, not something we normally have here on the set of Revealing the Truth, as we are a live program. However, phone ringing and speakers going crazy. We had, I want to tell our audience, we had already tuned you in. We had already set up the sound levels. But all of a sudden, the minute I began to open the program, it seems as if there in your home there was activity going on that was disruptive. It was truly disruptive. Have you ever experienced something like this before?
I have. Last week I was on a trip to Atlanta where I made an appearance on a program there. And while I was there, I did a live video on Facebook. And if anyone wants to go to Laura Vivian's Facebook, it is public. I'd like for them to see that. While I'm doing this live Facebook, the thing that I started to say was, this, just like I just said to you, because I want to make sure people know, it's not my shame. It's my Father's shame and the shame of everyone that's ever abused a child. As I'm doing this live video, everything's going along just fine. And when I said, it's not my shame, if you watch the video, all of a sudden my face contorted, really strange looking, and the video went out. It was out until after I made the statement, it was not my shame, it was the shame of my Father and everyone that does these evil things to children. Then my face went back to normal and I started talking again. This has happened so many times as I'm trying to tell my story. So I have no doubt that Satan is fighting me on this. I ask for your prayers. I ask for the prayers of your audience, as I feel like sometimes I am fighting that, because I have no doubt that this story he does not want this story told. There are countless demons that are working for Satan. I'm working for God. God has me in his palm of his hand, just like he has all of you in the palm of his hand. And I will not be defeated. If I have to go to my grave fighting this, I will.
Well, something the likes of which we have not seen, and certainly the spirit of Abaddon, the spirit of Apollyon, is a battle that you're specifically waging against that spirit. And so when you tell this story, and we're going to continue with the story here, we're reminded that your father's name was Abaddon. And truly, it sounds like almost as if his parents dedicated him to Satan at birth. Did you know your grandparents at all?
I did, not real well. My grandmother died when I was about 6 or 7, and then my grandfather moved away. He got remarried and moved to Florida. So I didn't know them real well. I have since spoken with my father's brothers, and one of them came to me at my brother's deathbed 2 years ago, and he stood next to me and he said, "Some things are better left unsaid." And I said, "No, I disagree. It's time for us to talk. It's time for us to stop it." And that was kind of surprising that he would even say that to me. And then I've also heard other stories. But I will say that in this family, there is definitely a division of the younger people, the younger brothers. There were 5 brothers. The younger ones are good. They're good Christian men. It's the 3 older ones, my father, which is number 3, that something happened, and I don't know what. I can't get to the bottom of it. But there was some kind of evil that took hold of those 3 boys, and I pray for their souls, but sometimes you can't pray for a soul enough. It's too late.
I understand. So as time went on, you took us up to age 12. There's a lot more to this story.
Yes.
And I want to make sure that we cover it all, and that people realize that God is in the healing business, and that you are healed from this, and it was through prayer and intercession and therapy.
Absolutely.
Therapy. And good, strong pastoral counseling that sustained you through all this. So we finished off with age 12. How did things progress from there?
Okay, so 12 is when the dissociation started. Every time that he abused me, which was all the time, him, and like I say, if it wasn't me, it was somebody else, but there was constant chaos. But my mind would dissociate. And what that means, like you said earlier, is while the abuse was going on, first of all, I want to say there were triggers that he used. Now looking back on it, he would say to me, "Come on, Laura." As soon as he said that, it told my protective mind to shut down. And then I would stay shut down until he would say, "This never happened." And that's why I wrote the name of the book, "This Should Never Have Happened." Because then I'd think, okay, this never happened. And so I would block it out. So the next year, that next year was particularly bad. He was a very angry man, obviously, but it came to a head because all of a sudden he had these young preteen and teenage children that were all rebelling against what he was doing. He'd never had that before. He had us totally under his control. So when I was about 13 and my sister was 12, he drove home the point, lock, stock, and barrel, so to speak. I always remembered that he came home that day. It was a beautiful spring day, and I was sitting at the kitchen table. My mother was standing at the window smoking a cigarette in her own little world like she always was. She was non-existent. And I remember I was doing my homework, and I was feeling pretty good. I heard the other children playing in the backyard, and the birds were singing. It was kind of a day like the spring days we're having now. And I heard his truck pull in the driveway. He was driving an old green Chevy truck. I heard him slam into the gravel, and gravel went everywhere. And I thought, whoa, what's going on? He's mad about something, obviously. And that's where my memory stopped until 3 years ago, when my memories came back to me. I now know what he did that day. He got out of the truck and he had a rifle in his hand. I heard him hollering something, but at that time I didn't know what he said. I have since spoken with members of my family and found out what he was saying was, "If I can't have you, no one can." He then went across the yard, and I didn't see him, but I heard the gunshot. My mother hollered, "Oh my God, no." And I got up and ran outside, and I will never forget, I did lock it out, but now when the memories came back, I was living it, I was seeing it. He was carrying my little sister in his arms. Her hair was matted with blood, and there was blood everywhere. He had shot her in the head. I don't know if you know what blood smells like, kind of an iron smell, but I remember the smell. I remember the look of everything now that I had blocked away. So he carried her into the house. My mom's going behind him, crying, and all of us are obviously shocked.
All right.
I've since had another brother. We just talked about this, and I said, do you remember it? And he said, no. He said, but I don't think I was home. He said, I remember something, but I don't think I was home. So he carried her into the house and he laid her into the bathtub. And my mother started running the water. And she told me, Laura, go get some towels. And so I did. And I came back and she's cleaning off all of this blood and the water is pure red. And as she's cleaning away the blood, I thought my dead sister was gone. All of a sudden her eyes flickered and she started waking up. And I was so happy. I turned around to tell my father, I said, she's alive. But he wasn't there. He'd already left. His only concern that day was that he was going to get caught. My sister now tells me, she did live, by the way. She's never been right. She's had some major issues in her life. She's been on mental disability most of her life. But she does remember that. And she has told people that story, okay? And when she's told people that, they question her. She's not right, And I got to admit, I kind of thought, nah, whatever. But she is so excited that story is in my book because it now confirms what she has always known. He shot her in the head. Now, she says the bullet's still there. I don't know that. My mother covered the place on her forehead with a bandage, and she does have a scar there. And we were instructed to go to school the next day and to tell everyone that our sister was homesick and that she'll be back to school, but she fell on the concrete, which we did. Nothing else was ever said about it. But my father drove home the message that day because that morning what had happened is he had come to my sister to abuse her, and she had rebuked him. She, like me, had given her life to Jesus, and she told him, I now belong to Jesus. And he had to get to work, so he left her, and I guess he stewed about it all day. Because that's why when he got out of the truck, he said, if I can't have you, no one can. And he tried to take her life. She tells me now that she went to Jesus that day. She said Jesus had her in his arms, and he told her, he says, I'll take you to heaven with me now. But she said she looked back at all of us, and she knew that my brothers and sisters and I would go into orphanage, be taken away from our families. We would be separated. She knew my father would go to prison. She didn't want that to happen. That was her dad. Because you had this, I don't know if you know about Stockholm syndrome, you had this strange protection of the person that's doing the most abuse. And so she said, no, Lord, I'm not ready to go yet. She said that there's been so many times since then, because her life has been horrible, that she has wished that she had just gone to the Lord that day. So he drove home that message. And we never told. He even threatened my children as I got older that, if I ever said or did anything, he would hurt my children. He'd ask me, do you love your children? And I'd say, of course I love my children. I mean, they were my life. And he'd say, then you will not say anything. Well, when he said that, I thought, why is he even saying that? Well, now I know why. He was afraid I was going to go out. And I was obviously the most outspoken of all of us. And I was the strongest willed, which is why God chose me for this gift of dissociation. He chose my mind to dissociate because had I not dissociated those many years ago, I couldn't tell my story now. I'd be like my brothers and sisters. They got into alcohol and drugs. They promiscuity, never maintained good relationships, never maintained good jobs. I, on the other hand, didn't know all of this. And so I went through my life in a very good manner. God sent me a wonderful man. I was only 15 when I met him. I talk about him in the book. He's been literally my angel, my godsend. I don't know what I would have done without him in my life. He sent me this great man. I had wonderful kids. I have great grandchildren. I had an excellent job. I live in a nice home. So I had what my brothers and sisters didn't have, but it's only because I dissociated. But now God has given me this ability to remember. And I feel like that's a gift also. It's hard. I wish I'd never remembered for myself.
Right.
But I know that God has now given me this ability to talk about it. So my father got away with it. For 81 years, he lived what seemed to be a charmed life. He was never taken into jail. He was never punished. He was never incarcerated for the things he did to us. On his deathbed, I went to him and I said, this is your chance. Doctors say you may not make it. But he was, he was in bad shape, but he was still able to talk. And I ran everybody else out of the room. I said, I need to talk to him alone. And I got down close to him. Even though I was scared to death of him, I got close to him and I said, this is your chance. You can make this right. And I said, if you tell me that you're sorry, I'll forgive you. I'll tell my brothers and sisters, they eventually will forgive you, and God will forgive you. But you have to say you're sorry. His last words to me, practically his last words to me were, I'm not sorry. I did nothing wrong. I think he's sorry now. I think he didn't get his punishment in this life. God is his judge and his judgment, but you can't do the things that he did and not have to answer for those. He is sorry. And so it did affect me. It affected my brothers and sisters. Like I say, they were into drugs, alcoholism, promiscuity. I, on the other hand, I had an eating disorder. I became morbidly obese, and in 2005, to the point where I had to have gastric bypass surgery. Had a lot of complications from that. But the bottom line is, I came through it, my mind came through it intact. And it is by the grace of God, because I now know I need to advocate. My grandchildren are my greatest source of joy. I never, ever want them or any other child to experience what my brothers and sisters and I did at the hands of that terrible person. And so that is why now I am advocating for child abuse prevention.
Laura, what are some of the signs that we need to look for in homes, in families, in the behavior of children, of how can we can't peek behind the blinds of a locked door and locked windows of a house with all kinds of horrors, as yours was a house of horrors, when children are terrorized to the point that they believe that harm will come to their siblings if they speak out. And so this threat which looms so heavily, and ultimately your sister was shot by your father. So this was a man who was not only physically and sexually abusive, but he was willing to kill to maintain this demonic stronghold in his life, as his name so appropriately was Abaddon. What can we do? What can we say? How can we minister? How do we help others? Certainly we are advocates for this as well. This is why we have you on and others on who have gone through this trauma. But what can we do?
All of the signs were there. Everything, our house was total chaos, okay? But even at school or at church, we were that family. We were those children that no one wanted to deal with because we were so out of control, especially my brothers. There was so much anger. There was so much acting out. There was so much hostility. Every single child in that house wet the bed. You don't have that with 7 children. There was something going on that we were all so emotionally distraught. There was even a time I tell about in my book where a woman walked in. My father had taken me to work with him one day. And he was working on a project in a house. And my lady walked in that owned the house. And he was abusing me. And she came to me and took my hand, and she said, "Come here, dear." She took me in the other room while he cleaned himself up, and then she took me out there and handed my hand to him, and I went home with him. That should never have happened. So this is the 60s and 70s. You didn't say anything, but now people know. Now people are aware. If you see and you think that there's something not wrong in that family. There was a nun one time at our church, at our school, that told me that me and my sisters were so quiet. And she said, "Why are you guys so quiet? You all seem so sad." I wanted to tell her All she would have had to do was sit down and look me in the eye and say, what is going on? I would have told, but no one ever asked me. Ask the child. If you think there's something going on, don't be afraid to ask. Even if it's not going on, what's the worst that can happen? You may make the family mad, you may make the people mad, but you may very likely be saving a child. So don't be afraid to speak out. And that's my message to the people watching. It's my message to the victims that are now going through it. And as far as my recovery goes, it's going to be a lifelong recovery. I still have nightmares. I still wake up screaming in the middle of the night. My poor husband, has to listen to my screaming out of clear blue. But I have gone through much therapy. There's a therapy called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization. It's hard for me to say, that I have gone through. So there are therapies out there to work with people that have been through this kind of trauma, but you have to be willing to accept the help. You have to know, and prayer. As I've said, Satan has fought me every step of the way. It would be much easier for me to not say anything. It'd be much easier. I'm retired from my job. I worked there, for many years. I had a good job. I got a good retirement. I don't have to do this. But I know that God has convicted me to do this. I know this is, if I spend the rest of my life speaking out for the children, this is what I have to do.
Laura, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
What are some of the ministries that people might find support from?
I right now am working with a new organization, not a new organization, but it's new to me, called Invisible Child. We are reaching out to mostly the academic world, colleges and that kind of thing, because it has to start with our young people. They have to be aware so they can go reach out. And so I'm very active with Invisible Child. There's another one that I went to a conference called Building Hope Today. Of course, CASA. I can't say enough good things about CASA. It's the child advocacy groups that are throughout the United States. They are working with these children. I had someone from CASA the other day tell me when they come to them, a lot of times they don't know they've been sexually abused. The CASA person, they're taken out of the home because of neglect or abuse or drugs or whatever the reason is. But it often comes out during the conversation that there also was this emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. So there are organizations and the church. My concern right now is with the churches because I had a situation not too long ago where I went to someone who is active in a church office. And I told her, I said, I want to give my presentation to your church.
Yes.
Her reaction to me was, they don't really do stuff like that. We're trying to teach them about God, about joy, about happiness. We don't want to, that's too hard for people to accept. Yes, it's hard. It's terribly hard.
Right, and it's very real. Laura, in this last minute that we have, would you close us with the prayer from the end of your book by Jack Knowles, Program Director of the Children's Home of Lubbock?
I absolutely will. This is a prayer for the abused child. Heavenly Father, in a world which surrounds us with such comfort that we forget about the hushed cries of the neglected and abused, you are their hope. Thank you for hearing the stifled cries of the children who feel forgotten. Make them know that there is hope for the healing. Be the small voice in the midst of their pain that gives them sanctuary even as they wonder why no one cares. Give them reason to hope and see beyond their confusion. Move us to their aid, making us aware of their need for a protector. Use the people and circumstances in their lives to build a refuge for their hearts in need of healing. Give each of us the wisdom and childlike faith we need so that Christ's glory is reflected, thus creating a light that will ultimately lead these little ones to the safe haven of your arms.
Amen.
Amen.
And amen. Laura Vivian, author of This Should Never Have Happened, The Release of a Tortured Mind. Thank you for being with us and sharing your story right here.
And you can also see about the book. Yes, I do have a website, and it's called thisshouldneverhavehappened.com. And the book can be found on Amazon and Barnes & Noble as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much
for letting me tell my story.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.